So you have a bad day in the classroom, you come home and I know all you want to do is eat your favourite food and you literally go straight to the shop and pick something up. This is the conversation I've been having with clients, new people who have been starting the coaching over the last few weeks, and I thought, you know what, this is such an issue. When I was teaching and I had a bad day, it is so hard to not allow those emotions to take hold, those emotions to sort of take over you and really have an impact on how your well-being. And it's not like any other job where you can just leave it at the door, right? Any other job you can kind of walk away, leave it at the door and leave your emotions there. But I think all of us who we are as teachers, we're quite emotional beings anyway, and it is really difficult for us to leave the job at the door sometimes, and it has a huge impact. And I'm sure you can resonate and know that there have been times in the classroom where you've had a bad day, behaviour's been really tricky, it's been really hard to manage, and it's had an impact on your well-being. You've gone home, it's had an impact on your choices, and this in turn has an impact on your fitness journey. Today I really want to talk about the hows, and then I want to talk about some steps that you can use and put in place to try and kind of prevent this and take hold of it a little bit as well, and sort of take control of that, because I know it does have such an impact. I think one of the hardest jobs in teaching is behaviour management. I think the actual teaching part and delivering lessons is okay. It's whether or not you can get those children engaged and those children motivated in the classroom. And I think once you've mastered that, it does become much easier to manage and as a career, and it does become a much easier job. But it's a process, and if you're given a particularly hard and challenging class, especially if you're early on in your career, it can take over, and it can take a real emotional toll on yourself and your well-being. It can really make you question your worth as well. And it has a big impact on how you feel about yourself. And like I said, it does have an impact on these choices. So when you do have one of those days where it's just been utterly hard, like everything happens in one go, you get, the children are really tricky, maybe you're really tired, the whiteboard's breaking, the printer's breaking, whatever it might look like, and you have no idea how to sort of like leave that at the door. Everyone says leave it at the door, right? Go home, start afresh tomorrow, feel good about it. Absolutely fine, but putting that in place is a different story. How can you actually be like, okay, I'm gonna leave it at the door, but how do you actually do that and show up like you are gonna put it there and just kind of like leave it without worrying about it all night? So when something happens like this, and when we have a day like this in teaching, it has an impact on us in two main ways. So the first way is it's actually having an impact on us in terms of our cortisol levels, so physically inside of our body. So when we are in a situation or an environment where things feel tricky or difficult, or we're feeling a little bit overwhelmed, our stress response is heightened. Now, the problem with our stress response is it's meant to be there, it's built in us, it's ingrained from evolutionary perspective to help us run away from lions, tigers, bears, whatever it might be. It's not something that's meant to be there on a permanent basis. Now, the problem is if you've got a challenging class, in particular if you're in primary school, you're with that class for a really good chunk of time throughout the week. So if your stress response is on high throughout that week, it is going to have a huge physical effect on you. Now, this can show up in different ways depending on who you are as an individual. So it might be in terms of your digestion, and maybe you suffer with IBS. So many teachers suffer with IBS that I talk to, and I genuinely do think it's because of the stress response in the job. It might be that you struggle with your maybe emotions, so you start to feel a little bit anxious, there's an anxiety around the career, or you get those Sunday feelings, those Sunday wobbles about going back into work. Maybe it's those sort of emotional side of it that you really do struggle with from the heightened stress. The third side of it is that you're exhausted. So when we're putting all this energy into stress and into our body and into our bloodstream, it takes a lot of energy to bring us back down again. It takes a lot of energy to be in that state. It takes a lot of energy to bring us down again. And what we find is as we're going through the week, it just leads us to being absolutely, utterly exhausted, which is just not sustainable and feasible. So that's sort of the physical response when these things are happening and how it can have a big impact on us. But then what about the more emotional side to it? So when these things happen in the classroom, we're human beings, and I think particularly as teachers, we are all sort of a certain type of human being. We care, right? We care about what's going on, and we want to do a good job. You wouldn't be a teacher if you didn't want to do a good job, because you have to go over and above to be able to perform at your job. I do feel like that's true. It's not just a job you can cruise by with. So when we feel like we're not doing a good job because maybe behaviour's been tricky or maybe the children have been hard, it has a big impact on our well-being, because we start to think we're not good enough as a teacher. And then that in turn leads us to go into some sort of comfort to feeling better, which can often look in the form of food, drinks, fizzy drinks, alcohol, treats like that. Definitely not in the form of going to the gym usually, but maybe coming here and binge watching our favourite programme, which is a completely normal response to a bad day. And I feel like then that is an impact on you in this negative cycle. You start to feel like you're not doing what you could, you're not implementing what you can, you start to feel a bit out of shape, you're not getting the results that you want, and then obviously that just has a knock-on effect on your confidence. Again, your confidence in the classroom is decreasing because behaviour is hard, and it's just this negative cycle repeating and repeating, and it just has such a bad impact on your well-being. You get to the end of the year and you think, what on earth, because your time is just consumed by the behaviour inside the classroom. I think the third area in terms of this, and this is one that's just kind of come to mind actually, when behaviour is hard, the workload comes with it. You've got more CPOMs to write, you've got more parents to talk to, you've got more situations to deal with at lunchtime and break times, which means you don't get a chance to do your other work. And the actual workload of teaching is much more challenging when you have a harder class. You can't walk around and do live marking as well when you've got a more challenging class. And all of these things add up and they end up taking more time out of your day. Again, having an impact on what time you've got available for you. Again, having an impact on how much time you've got out of the classroom. So I think obviously the root of the problem is us really understanding how to deal with and manage behaviour appropriately and getting that support in school. That's another conversation. Today I'm here to talk to you about your health and wellbeing around that behaviour management and how you look after you outside of the classroom. So I do think that this can come in two folds, and I think there needs to be a situation where you can learn how to control your physical emotions and physical changes in your body. Then there also needs to be something that you can do to control your emotional side to it as well. So it's taking hold of those behaviours that happen outside of the classroom. You know, those behaviours where you go and you give yourself a treat because you've had a really tough day. There needs to be something that we can put in place to deal with that side of it too. So if we look at the physical responses first of all, this takes a lot of time and a lot of practice, because the problem is your body's responding in that way for survival. Like I said earlier, it's an evolutionary response. So bringing your body back down to a safe zone or a safe space takes a lot of time and a lot of practice. One of the best ways that you can do this and regulate your body in the moment is 100% by breath work. If you feel that heightened stress, that heightened feeling throughout your body, that anxiety, doing a big double breath in, so through your nose, and then a slow breath out is the best way to physically slow and calm your nervous system down. So that's sort of taking control of the physical side. This takes time to really implement, this takes time to really learn, but it is very much sort of a practice thing. It's really taking hold of that. I think another way to really take hold of that physical response to the stress is after work giving yourself some sort of a physical barrier or cut off. I think learning to love exercise and learning to love exercise as a way to compartmentalize work is such a fantastic way of doing it. If you're on high stress alert and you come away from school and you put all of that energy into a gym workout straight away, or a walk or a run, you will get rid of that stress into something that's positive. And I think when you start to learn that connection between school and how you can use exercise positively for your mental health, that's when the consistency really shows, because you can show up as yourself week in, week out, seeing those results. And again, it has a positive impact because you're getting stronger, you're seeing those changes, and you're taking control of that stress response in the moment. I think the third area with the physical response in the moment is really understanding that and taking yourself and zooming out a little bit sometimes and just understanding that this is a job, it's fine, it's a job at the end of the day. These are children, they are acting like that in a way because they need help, they need support, and children act in a way like that when they feel safe, right? They wouldn't misbehave if they didn't feel safe. And I think, you know, a lot of the children that we do work with and deal with have had very tricky and difficult situations going on outside the classroom, and I think sometimes it's really understanding and sort of being able to see that these children aren't there because they're against you. They want you to help them, but they're just testing you to see if you will go. And I think once you start to learn to have that mindset shift of these children are actually, they've learned to test, that's what they do, and it's not my fault, and these things happen because that's what's going on in their life, and that's how they learn to, you know, build relationships. They're just used to responding that way. It's nothing that you've done, and it's our jobs to shape them and help them deal with their response too. And I think once you really look at the context of this, take yourself away from it, stop blaming yourself. It's not all about you, it's not about you doing a bad job, and start to really look at the why. It can help you rationalise that situation a little bit. So I think taking hold of that stress response first of all is super important, and starting to unpick the whys behind it and what's going on, the deeper rooted problem behind it, is a great way to take hold of it initially. The second part of it is taking hold of that emotional response. So after a day like that, you come home, and honestly, there's been so many days in my teaching career where I've come home and I've been like, right, I need to get a glass of wine tonight, I'm gonna have some chocolate tonight. And it happens because teaching is such a high stress job, and when you compare it to other jobs that people rarely come away feeling upset, I would say it's quite normal for a teacher to come away feeling upset and stressed at least once a week. And it does lead you to those behaviours because it's a normal response. You want to calm yourself, you want to feel a little bit better. What does a glass of wine do? It calms you and makes you feel a little bit better. And I think it's really taking hold of this in two different ways. I think the first way is like what I've just spoke about, is giving yourself that talking to and reminding yourself that these children are testing you because of a certain X, Y, and Z. It's not anything that you've done. It's not anything that you're bad at. It's not anything you could have done differently. Yes, there's always ways we can learn, and trust me, throughout your career, you will learn. I learned a hell of a lot throughout my 6 years around behaviour management. I've always worked in really deprived areas in terms of schools, and I've always had really challenging classes, and I loved the challenging classes. I thought they was absolutely great, but it is hard, and I know how difficult managing those children can be. But you do learn, and you need to remember that every challenging child that you've got is a new opportunity to learn from and develop you as a teacher and develop your career. And I think sort of seeing that and being like, seeing the gratitude in it almost, like these children are here to help me grow as a teacher, is a really good way of viewing it sometimes. I think the second part of it is understanding again and putting that cut-off in place. And giving yourself something that maybe is not a food or a drink-based reward. So maybe like a nice bubble bath, or something where you can go and chill, your favourite programme you can go and watch at home. Some sort of reward that is a little bit healthier. Even if you have like a healthy snack or a healthy pudding or a dessert that you really enjoy, that still keeps you on track, I think is a really good way to sort of build it in, rather than sort of diving into the biscuits or diving into something that will make yourself feel better. It's taking control of that sometimes and really preempting when you are going to feel like that, so you can monitor it and really understand what your responses are. Taking note of those responses is really good as well. Being self-aware as possible is so important. If you're not aware of what's going on and you're not aware and understanding the ins and outs and the whys behind it all, it's so important to understand how you respond to these things and the reasons behind it as well, rather than just sort of second guessing yourself and just kind of winging it a little bit, understanding what your behaviours are. And then once you notice the patterns, you can start to put things in place to try and break those habits and break those patterns as well. But yeah, I think having that awareness is key, and really understanding that it's not your fault, it's a priority, and really understanding that you can reward yourself in other ways and compartmentalise yourself from the job and the career is definitely sort of the hack to being able to change those and make that change and that difference in the classroom too. Anyway guys, I hope that's helpful, and I'll catch you all in the next one.